I thank you, Creator, God, my higher power, for the showings of the inner self that you showed me this weekend, and for the compassion that you have for me and for your whole world. I ask for your guidance tonight, Creator. I ask for your words and your intuitive thought and inspiration. I ask for the experiences in my life that are able to serve you today, and somebody might get something out of, and I might heal a little bit. Creator, I ask that you watch over all of us on the screen and all of us in recovery, and the people out there suffering from a spiritual malady, that they may find your light somehow, some way, someday. Be able to seek you and learn from you and find that power that you've given us to navigate our lives in a good way, in a sacred way. Just want to thank everybody for coming to the study tonight, Creator, and allow us to all have an open mind today, have a new experience with you, Creator, with each other, with your universe, with this program. I thank you for my life. Hi. Okay, awesome. Okay, kids, I want to touch on a couple things here. For the bigger part of the big book study, we've been focusing on, what's God's will, and, what gets in the way of God's will. How do we unblock this channel so that we can live a good, decent life, and maybe some of us even want to serve Creator, and that's kind of the goal, right? And so now we get to step 12, and step 12 is service, and we're to give back. We're to provide some type of service to the world, hack into the stream of life, as the book might say. And a lot of the self-examination steps, so we practice anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all of our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And as we kind of chop away self and the ego, and we try to practice these principles before personalities, we get to this place, of the latter 3 steps. And I believe, this is my belief, is that we're given the true nature of ourselves is to be giving and to serve our fellow man and human being and our Creator. But we've been conditioned in this world to serve ourselves. And there's a line in the chapter, Working with Others, that I'm going to flip to quickly right now. And I just want to kind of pull it apart for a quick second, kind of bring home a point. On page 93 in Working with Others, 3/4 of the way down the page, in the middle of the paragraph, it says, "He made the example of truth, that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action." That little line there says everything. Faith alone, the idea of God, the idea of this higher power and turning it over, it's insufficient. And essentially what we're talking about is the concept of God is not sufficient. The idea of God is not sufficient. And many of us can all relate to that, because there's periods in our sobriety, and especially in newer sobriety, where we thought we were turning it over, but the ego was turning it over. And as we kind of journey further into recovery, we learn how better to actually turn this shit over. So to be vital, and the word vital again means to giving of life, to give you the best life that you can have on earth, must be accompanied by self-sacrifice. And what have we learned through this study? Primarily self and sacrificing self. And I've been able to take you through the directions and actually give you the practical application of how to identify self and how to relinquish self through a consistent, persistent commitment to change who we are, right? And through the self-sacrifice, the unselfish constructive action just comes naturally. When we look at the beginning of the doctor's opinion, it says we had to work out our solution on the spiritual and altruistic plane. And I really emphasize the altruistic plane. And the word altruistic means unselfishly devoting oneself to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others. Remember, unselfishly devoting oneself to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others. That's where the solution to our spiritual malady actually lies in. When we kind of relate that to this unselfish constructive action, as we go out into the world and we start practicing good deeds, let's say, it's not necessarily that we're practicing these good deeds because we're unselfishly devoting ourselves to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others. We're doing it because we know logically it's the right thing to do. And it's kind of, that's where we got to start, right? It's kind of like I heard something this weekend that if you teach what it is that you actually are believing, whether you believe it or not, you teach that, you will come to believe it yourself. So as we go out into the world and we do altruistic action, maybe it's begrudgingly. Maybe we don't even really want to do these things. But over time, it'll kind of work itself into the subconscious and we start becoming the actions that we're doing. And then down the road, we become altruistic. And I'll tie that into step 7. Like step 7 is the surrender step, right? In the study, if you've been with me the whole time, you'll know that step six is learning how to surrender. And step 7 is I am surrender. The most profound result of all was the change in our attitude towards God, towards love. And it's now without reservation. We act in these ways without reservation. And the book also says there's always going to be desires that oppose the grace of God. So we're never going to do this in the perfect fashion. But it's the best possible attitude we can start and live this new journey with this attitude of love and altruism. And why I say all this is because as we get to the 12th step and we start, getting into sponsorship, getting into service, some of that action is because we just want to feel better and we're told to do it. And we kind of follow the dictates of the sponsor and the book and the program and what other people are saying. And then we start doing it. And a lot of times people will bail on the altruistic action of sponsorship. But I'll say it like this, the 12 steps will give you a lot, and most people will only do the 12 steps because they want what they want. They want to feel good. And you will see if you stick around and you follow this program, you'll see people constantly doing inventory over and over and over because they just want to feel good. And there's a spot where inventory becomes super selfish. And when you peel back the layers of why you're doing inventory, it's because they want to feel good, which is still a heavy manifestation of self itself, except it's diluted or masked by the good intention of wanting to be a better person. But self's all over it. So they're constantly doing inventory because they can't feel better. Because the feeling better comes through the action of working with other people and trying to work that altruism like in a different way. So the 12 steps will give you a lot, but the 12 steps working with others will give you everything. And as we work the last 3 steps, step 10 is that understanding self-sacrifice, sacrificing that in that moment. And when we talk about altruism again, in the step 10, as I relinquish self in whatever moment, that's an act of altruism. Except that act of altruism isn't as big of a display because it's not an action like outside yourself where you're going to do something like open a door or go help somebody or do outreach. It's not like that. It's an internal action that you actually learn how to sacrifice through your internal. And that's actually altruism in a deeper kind of altruism because nobody knows at all. Nobody has a chance of seeing it. And it hits that subconscious. And then the unselfish constructive action, eventually it just starts working itself out of you. And you become unreserved at doing what's right in this world. There's no reservation. Except every now and then there will be a desire that opposes the grace of God because we still have some fear in us, right? And there's another piece I want to touch base on in Bill's story before we get going here. A couple things. Page 13, 2/3 of the way down the page. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. And when we did step 10, it talked about having God consciousness. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense, meaning the way that I run my life is actually the opposite. And that comes with the work. I was to sit quietly when doubt, only asking for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. That's what I do in step 11, is I sit quietly in doubt, asking for direction. Which way do I go, God? Can I borrow some of your strength and courage and your power to navigate these situations in my life? You know, why am I struggling, Creator? Whatever it might be. To meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my requests bore on my usefulness to others. So there's something really important. Never am I to pray for myself, except how my requests bore on my usefulness to other people, which is really hard because I want what I want. But later, the common sense will thus become uncommon sense. What you'll learn is you'll get what it is that you always wanted, but you didn't know what it was that you actually wanted until you get down this road a little while. And as you do this program, you start letting go of the things that you thought you wanted, and then you get them back in a way that's different and better. Then, only then may I expect to receive. And think about that sentence. Bill W. never puts expect, and he does right there. Then only might I expect to receive, period. And then he says that would be in great measure. Just imagine what that could mean, right? Imagine what that actually means. You can only imagine it. You can't even imagine it, because the journey of what we're talking about is the journey of God, and you can't express with the ego, with the logical mind, what that fucking might be. But as you do this, you'll know, and you'll be like, someone will ask you, what is it? You fucking don't have any words because it's too beautiful to express. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter into a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of way of living which answered all of my problems. That's a promise, man. The elements of a way of living which answered all of my problems. Belief in a power of God plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were essential requirements. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant self-destruction. Meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn all things to the Father of light who presides over us. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was an utter confidence. And when we talk about confidence, my confidence today, these men believe in themselves, like a lot of you people believe in yourself. But we believe more in the power, right? That power that pulls us back from the gates of death, pulls us back from ourselves. Because we know going down the path of self is the fucking way to the gates of death. So we dummy up here and we fucking figured out some shit. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity that I have never known. There was an utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. And for us, he grows into us more slowly because most of us have the educational variety of the spiritual awakenings, although there are bigger moments where we have bigger moments. And I don't think we're ever the same person, like day by day when we work this program. We're always growing and changing. We're never really staying the same person. I did an event this weekend where I was up north at a ceremony thing, and I come home a different person. 3 weeks ago, I was at another ceremony and I came home a different person. I was with my girlfriend last night and she experienced these ceremonies as well. And last night she says, I think I'm a different woman. And we become different because we're growing in spiritual awakenings and we're shedding old things based in fear, and we're developing new ideas based in like loving principles. And it does change us and it shapes us. So before I get going in the big book, I want to read one more thing out of the 12 and 12 on page 124. It's on 124, middle of the page in the 12 and 12. This is really beautiful. Listen to this. Still more wonderful is the feeling that we do not have to be specially distinguished among our fellows in order to be useful and profoundly happy. Not many of us can be leaders of prominence, nor do we wish to be. Service gladly rendered, obligations squarely met, troubles well accepted or solved with God's help. The knowledge that at home or in the world outside, we are partners in a common effort. The well understood fact is that in God's sight, all human beings are important. The proof that love freely given surely brings full return. The certainty that we are no longer isolated and alone in self-constructed prisons. The surety that we no longer need to be square pegs in round holes, but we can fit and belong in God's scheme of things. These are the permanent and legitimate satisfactions. Fuck, hold on. I'm struggling to read this. I'm fucking getting emotional. These are the permanent and legitimate satisfactions of right living, for which no amount of pomp or circumstance, no heap of material possessions could possibly be substitutes. True ambition is not what we thought it was. True ambition is the deep desire to live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God. And that's it. Every now and then I'll do something in these big book studies or speaker meetings, and I'll read something I've read many times, or I'll tell part of a story that I've told many times. But it just hits me in a different way. And in some ways I got to do everything that I in some ways I got to do everything that I can to hold back from just bawling, because the gratitude that I have for this program and the literature and the people, yeah, I don't know. I just get speechless and I don't even know what the fuck to say. But you guys know that feeling. So let's start. Chapter 7, working with others. Okay. So when we get to this chapter, working with others, and we're finally at our 12th step, the number one thing I think I hear is, I'm not ready. Or how do I start sponsoring? I don't think I'm experienced enough. And, I hear all these excuses why people don't want to go and do this part of the program. Well, this part of the program is going to allow you to see yourself better than any other aspect of this program. You're going to be looking at yourself, talking to yourself, listening to yourself. You're going to be building compassion for your fellow human being. You're going to see what instincts are driving them powerfully, blindly, and subtly. You're going to see the powerlessness in these people to not be able to control their desires, to fucking get into relationships, to rage out in anger, to whatever it might be. You're going to see that in other people, and you're going to see that in yourself. You're going to build compassion for that person because you're going to see that that's you. And you're going to understand yourself. So as you understand them, you understand yourself. You start forgiving them because you're not judging them by their shortcomings or by what they're doing anymore, because you know that they're just a reflection of you. And as we begin to open that heart of theirs, we begin to open our hearts of our own selves, and we begin to develop, like the book says, true kinship between man and God, like a real partnership, where you can fucking share honestly and vulnerably with two people, and you're not judging of what they're doing or what they're saying, because you've been there. And when we did step 6 and we read through the step 4 and the 12 and 12 literature as part of step 6, On the first page and a half of that 4, you can see the instincts that drive us blindly, subtly, powerfully. They dominate us. They insist upon ruling our lives. You can see that through working with others. And this is the part that most people won't do, and it's the most beautiful part of the program. So don't worry about if you have enough experience. The book says the message that can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. You have the depth and you have the weight. You can share your experience as an addict and alcoholic. That grabs them, but they want something from you, and it's what you got. It's that God dope that you're shining. That's that humility that you've chiseled out of fucking excavating all that material. That's that shininess in you that they want. And all you got to do is read through the book and share your experiences with the lines in there. That's it. And through that, you get better at it. You do it once, okay, you do it twice. The second time, you're 100% better than you were the first time. And if you really trust in your God, you know that God's going to fucking guide you right through the process. So you don't need to worry about it. And why? Is because if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then fucking alcohol and drugs are going to do what they're supposed to do. So don't worry about it, because the alcohol and drugs are going to fucking take them out if we don't give it a shot anyway. And all we can do is our best. And the book in this chapter here is like clear-cut directions. It will really show you how to navigate your relationship with the wet alcoholic. This is more about the wet alcoholic, meaning a newly trying to get sober person off of drugs or alcohol. This is meant for the wet alcoholic. A lot of my sponsorship, I'm not sponsoring wet alcoholics. I'm sponsoring dry alcoholics that have been sober for a long time, but they need something more. And that part will come to you as you gain experience sponsoring wet people. And then you can sponsor other people and gain a different level of experience. And you start understanding us. And you start seeing how the disease kills. And then, like, you guys know how passionate I am. A lot of my passion comes from watching people die. And some people, they're just like, oh, that guy, he's full of ego and shit. But they don't know. They don't know what I've seen. They don't know how, I've tried to help. And when you see enough death, you really want to help. And when you are in this literature and you see what works, it's like, fucking just do this. Do this book, man. It'll change your fucking life. So let's get started here. Chapter 7, working with others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when all other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Underline that. Remember, they are very ill. Because what we forget when we start working with alcoholics and addicts and just being in the fellowship, people are very ill here. And I don't mean just because they're hooked on a substance. We have a problem that centers in our mind, and that is a mental illness. And it comes out in the manifestations of self, instincts in collision. And people do a lot of fucking crazy shit in this program. And you got to remember, you take the sickest people in society and you jam them all into one place. And it's like a little CO2 cartridge of compressed air. And that's what we call Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. So we got to remember there's some very sick people here. That's important. And as you're here, even like me with 9 years, I understand there's very sick people here. Not everyone's seeking the fellowship of the Spirit. So again, it works when all other activities fail, and it ensures immunity from alcohol when all other activities fail. So most of the activities that somebody's going to try to do in their recovery, besides sponsorship, is they're going to try all the other activities. What are the other activities that are going to fail? Inventory, prayer, meditation. That's what everyone's going to always go to first. But when all those activities fail, try this, because this is where the God dope is. This is where service is born, and this is where altruism is born. This is where the knowledge of this literature, where you saw me tearing up just reading some fucking pages. That's what happens when you know this literature. because the literature doesn't actually change. You change as a result of living this shit. And then the gratitude just starts pouring out of you. You can secure their confidence when others fail. And that's the deal. You know, we build that relationship. Life will take on a new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch the loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you. You have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. So as we kind of get into this part of the program, like I said, a lot of people aren't going to do this. And even some of us, as we get started on this journey, you may not want to do this. Maybe you worked with 10 people or 6 people, and you're like, fuck, man, my time gets wasted. Man, this is happening. Man, they don't respect this. Man, this is hard. This is interrupting a lot of my life. That doesn't matter. As you do this and you keep doing it, it's going to take you at least 10 sponsees just to get a bit of a system, because you don't have a system. It took me 15 sponsees just to even get a bit of a system. And then it took me 15 more to mold that system and just get an idea of kind of what I was dealing with. So that's 30 sponsees. And out of those 30 sponsees, trust me, I didn't get one of them through the 12 steps. I probably didn't get a person 12 step till I was 50 guys in. And then as I did this more, I've gotten way better at it, and I can get people 12 step pretty easily now. But at first, you got to cut your teeth, right? You got to figure shit out. You got to go through trial and error. The thing is as you work with these people, you're gaining in humility yourself. And the humility is what actually is going to work for you. Michael W., can I ask you a question? So I know when you first started sponsoring too, I'm just trying to get you to back me up on this. You started sponsoring, you reached out a lot at the beginning to get counsel from myself and other people in the program on kind of what was going on as you're moving through. And as you sponsored your first number of people, you learned that you had to build the system, right? And then once you kind of knew what you were dealing with, then you could kind of mold that system and kind of, you know, give us a little explanation of that and how it works for you now.
Yeah, excuse me, for sure. You know, when I started to sponsor, you know, I wanted to sponsor desperately. And in the beginning, all I wanted was a sponsee so that I could say I had a sponsee, I think. But I don't think I ever even said it, but that was why. And then, you know, things changed, and, you know, there's just, you know, I didn't have enough time to sponsor everybody that wanted it. And, you know, I was so fortunate to have done many of these big book studies. Like this is probably the 4th, maybe even 5th one of Bill's big book studies that I've been through, and just all that gold, really, you know, that was the gold that helped me to, you know, the first few people probably fell away, but, you know, I've been so fortunate in sponsoring to have, you know, God has really worked in people's lives, and it's not because of me, you know, it's because of this sort of thing, you know, the information that's out there now, and just letting God do the work. But now, you know, if I can just let God do it, you know, just a minute here. Sorry about that. You know, there's never a shortage of people to sponsor. And I didn't freaking believe it, really. You know, that they're just coming out of the woodwork. And it's not because I have any magic potion when I stand up and speak. It's just that God is working in people's lives. And, you know, I'm so grateful to this big book study and Bill. And I did phone Bill a lot, and would tell him a situation that I had what would he suggest? Because, you know, it's all new territory, and you know, we are so fortunate. I feel like I fell into the AA gold mine, really, you know, and if we can just draw on that, you know, lots of lives can be changed. I don't know, Bill, how is that kind of what?
That's perfect, bro. And you brought up a couple other good points. Like where it says in here, the fellowship will grow up about you to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. As we start sponsoring, we can't possibly know all the directions to go. Yes, a lot of it's in this book here, but we lean on the people, God-centered 12-step pillars, and we talk to other people who are invested in this work as well. And we can get a lot of confidence. We can get a lot of motivation, and we can get some good answers from them because we don't do this shit alone, right? And another thing you talked about, like you just wanted a sponsee so you could have a sponsee. Well, fuck, same with me. And like when I said sometimes you got to start altruistic action with just an action, like fuck, even if you're sponsoring out of ego to begin with, like I started, you know what? Do whatever it takes to get working down that path. Even if you're sponsoring out of fear, you know what? Go for it. At least start that path, because when you do it the second time, you're going to be 100% better than you were the first time. And you're going to learn a thing or two. Sometimes you learn what not to do, but a lot of times you learn what to do. So thank you, Michael. Perhaps you are not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. Yeah, we can easily find them. You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. Remember, this was written in 1939. They will be only too glad to assist you. Don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. You will be handicapped if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens that because of your own drinking experience, your own using experience, you can be uniquely useful to others, other alcoholics or addicts. So cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. When you discover a prospect, so when you find somebody for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste your time trying to persuade him. There's clear-cut directions right there. But if you do find somebody who wants to recover and they're interested, you find out all you can about him. So when I first meet with a sponsee and they ask me, you know, can you help me out? I said, okay, I can't say that yet, but let's meet for a coffee. And when I meet him for a coffee, I'm like, okay, tell me your whole story in 10 minutes or less. Tell me about your religious leanings. Tell me about a whole bunch of shit about you so I can get to know what I'm dealing with here. And I really want to know their story, like how you grew up and how you started drinking, how you started using, maybe shit about your parents. And, you know, I want to learn a lot about you in those initial meetings and all through the relationship so I can get to understand you, right? But if this guy's not really willing and he doesn't really want to stop, you know what? I wish him all the best and say my number's always on. Because sometimes they don't really want it. Sometimes they want it when they're desperate, and then they don't really want it. And it says here, don't waste your time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. And that's really important. So as you don't waste your time initially with some of these people, you let them know your phone's on. Or if they want you to befriend them and just be friends, but they're still going to drink and use, like how many times have I said, I don't have a book for that way of life. I don't have a book for that way of life, and I can't really help you. And I don't know, like, I'm not just going to be your friend if you're using, and I'm not. I need to live my life like sober. And I don't have a book for living life like that. I've said that many times to people. I said, but if you ever want this, I'm here, man. I'm here. And then they have come back many, many times. This advice is given for the family also. Remember, this book was written for the family, for the employer, for the medical fraternity. Those were suggested, and for the directions of the alcoholic wasn't suggested for the alcoholic. But it is mentioning the family because the family was meant to take the steps as well. They should be patient, realizing they are dealing with a sick person. Again, there it is, sick person. If there is any indication that he wants to stop, have a good talk with him, with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. That's not too likely these days. So, but you could, maybe you are going to talk to his wife or his kids or whatever. Get an idea of his behaviors, his problems, his background, the seriousness of his condition, and his religious leanings. So again, you're just finding out more information about this guy. You need this information to put yourself in his place to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. Sometimes it is wise to wait till he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in dangerous physical condition, it's better to risk it. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk. Right there. Don't deal with these people when they are very drunk. Don't waste your time speaking with them for hours while they're drinking and using. You just tell them this. Call me when you're sober. I can't help you when you're wasted. And that's it. And then you know what? They call you the next day and they're drunk or whatever again, and they want you again. If you stand that line and you say, call me when you're sober, I can't help you when you're drunk or high, eventually they're going to call you when they're not drunk or high, and they're going to say, I need your help. Then you have action, but you can't help them. And there's been many times when I was new in sponsorship where I would spend an hour or 2 hours on the phone with somebody who was drunk thinking I was helping them. And then I'd run into them at the meeting and I'd be like, hey, how did that all work out? And they don't even remember talking to me. And I just wasted so much time talking to somebody that was drunk for hours, right? And they don't even remember any of it. Sometimes it is wise to wait till he goes on a binge. That's really important right there. So as you start getting better at this and you start watching alcoholics and you start following these clear-cut directions of step 12, like I kind of have these guys in my peripheral and I'm watching them and I'm waiting for them to go on the binge because they're not really going to listen. The ego's already so asserted itself that they're not going to listen to you at this stage of the game. So I watch, and then they go on their binge. And then once I know they're on their binge, then maybe when they come out of the spree, then they're really hopeless and desperate and their ears are turned on. And then there's some techniques that you can use to show them the hopelessness of their condition. And then you can generate momentum with them. And some of that will be described in this chapter. But lots of times it's wise to wait for them to go on the binge. The thing nowadays with the drugs that are out there, they could easily die, right? But, you know, that's part of the nature of what we're doing here. Unless he is ugly and the family needs your help, wait for the end of the spree, or at least a lucid interval. Then let his family or friend ask him if he wants to quit for good and if he would go to any extreme to do so. If he says yes, when his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. So right there, as he comes out of the spree, then you go in and you talk to him. Are you done? Are you really done? And if you are, then you can start directing them. Maybe it's like, okay, let's go to a meeting. Let's do this. Let's do that. And the other thing about working with these guys, you might be really eager to get started as soon as they're dry and they're off a spree and they say they want it. Don't do that. Wait at least 5 days, just like the doctor's opinion talks about. It says they have a better chance of accepting what we have to offer when they're free from their jittery and befoggedness, meaning they got to detox themselves off of that stuff for at least 5 days. Because you could work with them after day one and they don't retain any of that information at all. And then be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. So when Dr. Bob was approached by Bill W., Dr. Bob had many people go to talk to Dr. Bob about Dr. Bob's drinking. And Dr. Bob got sick of people talking to Dr. Bob about his drinking. And when Bill W. showed up at Dr. Bob's house, he said, I'll give you 15 minutes, bro, and then you're fucking out of here. Bill W. didn't talk about Dr. Bob's drinking. Bill W. talked about his own drinking. And that was the message that Dr. Bob heard was, you're like me, you're like me, you're like me. So like this line says right here, should be drawn to you, a person who has recovered. You talk about the depth of your alcoholism or your addiction, and you relate to them because you know they're like you. And then you can talk about some of the things that worked. But we don't go into the spiritual and God shit right off the bat. That's for sure. You talk about, some of the things that you did, and you went to some meetings and, whatever it is. But we got to be careful with certain things that we talk about, because we'll spoil a later opportunity if we come off as a evangelist or something, right? So you should be described to him as one of a fellowship who, as part of their own recovery, try to help others. And you can use that too. And who would be glad to talk to him if he cares to see you. Never enforce yourself upon them. If they don't want to see you, you just let it go at that. Leave them your number. If he does not want to see you, there it is. Never force yourself upon him. And family. So a lot of us try to help family, right? And we can be like these leaders and examples within our family. And they actually want what we have because they've seen how we are most of our lives. And then they see us sober and thriving and doing good things. Then they come to us and they kind of they're curious. And then we kind of take that as like the spark to go at them and kind of give them what we have. But we got to be really careful with family because we can push them away and we can create like more disturbance within our family. So you just got to walk with humility. And then if they really want it, you have to talk to them and share it like in an organic way. But because they're family, we almost overdo it sometimes, right? And like family shouldn't actually work with family most of the time. I'm not saying always, but you can at least start taking them to a meeting. And then they can see what you see. And if they like it, they can keep coming with you. And if they don't like it, they don't have to come. But if they're curious, that's a good sign. Neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him much about you. They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. You might place this book where he can see it in the interval. Here, no specific rule can be given. The family must decide these things, but urge them not to be over anxious. And so for anyone who is in a family and they see you and they know that this guy, maybe it's your brother or your cousin or your uncle or your auntie or whatever, you got to tell the family, like, don't be over anxious and like quit talking to him, like to come to me and come to me. Like you got to just do this with organic and common sense and tactfulness. And then as you get better with your relationship with God and more confident, you'll know how to talk to them. And if you pray and you meditate on how to talk, you'll get the words. And then you can be more effective. But always be ready to walk away and not say anything more. Maybe it's just a little seed plant here and a little seed plant there. Usually the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting man through his family. Approach through a doctor or an institution is a better bet. If your man needs hospitalization, he should have it, but not forcibly unless he is violent. Let the doctor, if he will, tell him he has something in the way of a solution. When your man is better, the doctor might suggest a visit from you. Though you have talked with the family, leave them out of it for the first discussion. Under these conditions, your prospect will see he is under no pressure. And honestly, when they feel like they're under no pressure, especially when they've been pressured for most of their, worst drinking career, and then they quit getting pressure, it's almost like they're wondering, why is nobody pressuring me? Once you just let off, they're either going to go straight at drinking and using, or they're going to become curious again. And why is nobody pressuring me? And the no pressure is often the best approach. Or if you are going to pressure somebody to like take that path, it's like very tactful seed planting. You say certain little things. Don't talk about God. It's like, my nephew, he did a 12-step program and he was terribly addicted to crack or cocaine or whatever. And he's doing well now. Every now and then you throw something like that in and you change it up, right? So you'll learn how to do that. When your man is better, the doctor might suggest a visit from you. Though you have talked with the family, leave them out of it in the first discussion. Under these conditions, your prospect will see he is under no pressure. He will feel he can deal with you without being nagged by his family. Call on him while he was still jittery. So that's after he's done his drinking spree and he's still jittery and he feels guilty and shameful. That's the best time to hit in there. But he has to be done the spree. So if he can get 1 or 2 days sober and he still feels like shit, that's when you go in. That's when you show him the hopelessness of his condition. That's where you bring up, like, you know, how's your job doing? Well, I lost my job. You know, how's your relationship with your wife? Oh, she doesn't want anything to do with me. You know, how's your buddy John doing? Well, he fucking punched me out this weekend. Like, you show him all of these things and they eventually go, fuck, man, my drinking is out of control. Call on him while he is still jittery. That's really important. He may be more receptive when he is depressed. See your man alone if possible. And really, if you are with the family or his friends, don't even see him with his family and friends, because he's not going to be legitimate. He's going to be acting to some degree. But if you can get him alone, you got a better chance of just being purely honest, and he's going to actually be more honest than if he's with his family. Because if it's his mom or his dad or his brother, they all want him to be sober, and he's going to say the right things, but you'll get the read that he doesn't really want it, but he's going to bullshit you. If you can get him alone, he'll tell you, like, dude, I'm not really ready. Or maybe he is ready, but try to get him alone, okay? See your man alone if possible. First, engage in general conversation. So when we go to meetings, let's say you're a new sponsor and, you know, you're eager to get a sponsee. What you do is you go to the meeting and you just say, hey, welcome. Good to see you. Boom, done. You see him at another meeting 2 days later. Hey, good to see you again. Boom, done. Third meeting. Now you're saying, hey, how's it going, man? I've seen you at a couple meetings. How long you been around? And now the conversation grows. Maybe you're talking about hockey. Maybe you're talking about the weather. It's got to start organically. And maybe by the 10th or 15th conversation, and he now feels like a little bit of trust in you and a little bit of like, okay, this guy's cool. Now you can kind of go, okay, what step are you on? Oh, how are things going? Oh, you're in treatment. Oh, you're on step 4. Oh, you've relapsed a few times, you know. Have you ever finished the steps? Blah, blah, blah. It can kind of take off from there. And this is one of the best pieces of advice you're ever going to hear. You always give them your number at a certain point using tact and common sense. And you say, hey, man, if you ever want anyone to show you the ropes or hit a meeting, here's my number. There's no pressure in that. You want somebody to show you the ropes? You leave it in his court. You go, hey, you need a sponsor? They're like, whoa, hold on. But if you say you need anyone to show you the ropes or you want to hit a meeting, here's my number, bro. And that's it. That's your best advice you're going to hear to try to get, you know, guys to actually engage with you or ladies to engage with you. Because a lot of these people do want someone to show them the ropes, but they don't really want you to tell them how to do that. And maybe you start taking them to the odd meeting. Maybe you just meet them at some meetings. Maybe you're working with another new guy and you bring him and you know this guy's going to be there and you introduce the two newcomers together. Like, there's many things that you'll learn. And like I said, those first 15 sponsees, this is kind of what you're starting to figure out. Trying to figure out your system. You're starting to learn what you're actually dealing with. And then you've learned what you're kind of dealing with to a degree. And then now you hone that and you shape that over the next 15. And then you get a little better at it. Your time's not wasted as much and your words are more effective and your strategy is more in alignment and it's more natural. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experience to encourage him to speak of himself. That's after you've worked it for a bit, right? If he wishes to talk, then let him do so. And once you kind of build this rapport with them, they're going to fucking talk, okay? That's a guarantee that the alcoholic's going to talk to you. He's going to talk about himself non-fucking stop, because that's what alcoholics typically do. So once they built that rapport with you, and you kind of learn how to ask the right questions, and you're trusted by this person, they're going to talk for sure about themselves. And you know what? Let them do so. Let them do so. So you can learn more about him. You can get a feel for his ego. You can get a feel for, you know, what he believes and how resentful he is and how angry he is or how lustful he is. Like, you can get a lot of information from an alcoholic when they just want to talk now. And they want to talk, trust me. You will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. Exactly what I just said. If he is not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit. But say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. If he is in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you, being careful not to moralize or lecture. Like, there's some awesome clear-cut directions for you guys right there. Like, you take note of that and you go apply that and see how it works. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. One of the best things that I've learned how to do is I'm able to take the fucking hopelessness and the debauchery of this illness, and I make a lot of light out of it. It's like the old theory of, oh, you're an alcoholic who pisses your pants, so am I. High five. Woo! Right? And you fucking get some laughter out of the stupidity of what we do. And that really lightens it up. I remember not too long ago, I was cruising around with one of my old sponsees who's 5 years sober. And then one of my buddies who is about a year and a bit sober. And then we had this new guy. And this new guy was pretty guilt and shame ridden. And he'd just come out of a little bender, and he was really fucking, you know, shameful and not in the best place. But me and my buds, we're, you know, there's levity in our recovery. So as I'm kind of sharing my stories with me and my buddies, and we're laughing it off about, like, you know, this is what we fucking do. You know, he got lightened up in it, right? And he kind of included himself in some of these jokes that, you know, only we will get, right? You can't be saying these jokes around non-alcoholics in your family. They're going to think you're fucking crazy. But we get each other, right? Just like it says on the first page of There Is the Solution. We are people who would normally not mix, but there exists among us a friendship, a fellowship that is indescribably wonderful. And that's what we're talking about. So you learn how to do that. If he is in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you, being careful not to moralize or lecture. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. Get him to tell some of his. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And I guess before we go on break, as we go through this chapter, really look at the words and see what they're actually doing. That whole chapter is clear-cut directions. There's your directions in this book of what to do and what not to do in this chapter. So you can really tune in to what to do and what not to do. So as we're sharing in the meetings, like, there's a lot of meetings that have like your topic discussion meetings, and, you know, those are okay. But they're not talking about like the directions and the steps. Typically, they're talking about like general opinions on honesty or general opinions on whatever the topic might be. So it skews the program a little bit for the newcomer. But as you are sharing in meetings, I would implore you to, how you really get people to engage is you share what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now in your share. And really what you're sharing on to begin the share is like the step one. You're sharing on the hopeless nature. You're sharing on the pain. You're sharing on the inability to leave it alone and how you couldn't stop and who you hurt. And then, you know, kind of like morphing it into, you know, finding a sponsor and whatever, however you want to do it. But it's a really good skill to start honing and trying to pray for, because the people will want that. And they'll come up to you. And then you fishing for sponsees becomes less effort, because they're actually coming to you and they want what you have. And like, not to toot my own horn, but I guess a little bit, I've almost never went looking for sponsees ever in the program. They've always come. I've never had a shortage of sponsees. I don't know really why. But I do believe it's because of that, because I actually am sharing about like the disease itself, and people are like, fuck, that's what I feel like. That's how I am. That's I want something different, right? So as you're sharing about like what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, that's a really good way to kind of hone your sharing to get somebody to come and ask you to sponsor them. 91. And the other thing I'll add to that, the more vulnerable you get in your sharing, the more healing you'll actually get. A lot of people are too scared to share certain things. And of course, we don't want to share like everything, because some of that's meant for a sponsor. But as you share really vulnerable stuff and you kind of don't give it the power anymore, you've released it in the meetings through some sharing or maybe speaker meetings or whatever, you actually start healing yourself from whatever it was. And you become more easily able to share on it. And those are the experiences that draw people in, because they're like, wow, they just shared something like brutal or fucking from their depth or whatever, right? And everyone wants to do that, but we're too scared to. Okay. When he sees you know all about the drinking game, that's what step 1 is about. Commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were. You know, the baffling feature of alcohol, the inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish. That's what it's talking about. How you finally learned that you were sick. How did you learn that you were sick? You didn't learn you were sick at just 3-topic discussion meetings. You probably learned how sick you were through the literature and through, you know, the step work. Right? Give them an account of the struggles that made you stop. You know, your experience. What kind of struggles? What vulnerable struggles are you going to share that you couldn't stand anymore about yourself that made you really want to stop? Show him the mental twist, which leads to the first drink of the spree. That utter inability to leave it alone. The insane thought that precedes the first drink. The thought of drink and some lame, trivial excuse, and then you're as good as drunk. Like, it's talking all about step 1 right here. We suggest you do this as we have done in the chapter on alcoholism, Jim's story and Fred's story. If he is alcoholic, he will understand you at once. Boom. And that's also goes with the feelings and the emotions, the anger and the lust and the relationships and all that stuff. People get that. And when you start sharing about like relationship hopping and blah, 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 people are like clued into that because they've never thought about that kind of stuff. They're like, wow, they just shared like how I've been living my life for the last 15 years. They know something that I don't know. And then they're going to come talk to you. And that's where you start some of this initial talk and banter between you so that you can eventually, here, if you ever need someone to show you the ropes, here's my number. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own down the road. If you are satisfied that he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopelessness feature of the malady, right? And the hopelessness feature of the malady is really described in the chapter, There's the Solution. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental conditioning surrounding the first drinks prevents normal functioning of the willpower. Don't at this stage refer to the book unless he has seen it and wishes to discuss it. So all through those initial meetings where you're seeing him at the meetings and blah, 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 you can use general conversation and you can share the mental inconsistencies. You can share the inability to leave it alone. You can share this story of how you were supposed to go to your daughter's, your grandma's funeral or whatever, and you took a drink and you missed everything. Like sharing all of that stuff, right? That's what grabs them. And be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusions. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that he possibly can. If he is not too alcoholic, but insist that if he is severely afflicted, there may be little chance that he can recover by himself. And that would come like later in your guys' meetings with each other. You can't tell them that right off the bat, but 5, 10, 15 of these little conversations in, these kind of things are going to come out organically, and that starts grabbing them. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. and really highlight the illness, right? Because it is an illness. It's an illness that we don't believe we have that's really an illness. In the chapter, there's a solution. It says, an illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it is an illness. They have to come to believe that they have an illness. And if you talk about it as an illness, that it's the illness that tells you you don't have an illness even, or however you want to word it, then they start understanding. And like I say, you know, it's a mental illness. And a lot of people are like, whoa, this is a mental illness? And once you've stuck around here a little while, you fucking know it's a mental illness. Our brains just function differently. Like our self-concernedness is at an extreme, and it really causes us great difficulty in our mind and in the rest of our lives, right? Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of the body, so that allergy, and the mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell an alcoholic patient that doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, of the traits of the alcoholic. If his own doctor is willing to tell him he is an alcoholic, so much the better. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you the question if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Again, tell him exactly what happened to you. And especially if you get him one-on-one, don't be afraid to share some of that stuff that you might not share in the meeting, right? Maybe some of us have been through those horrible sexual abuse things and blah, blah, blah. And like, those things might be the key. That's why going to God and praying and asking God for the right words is so important before you enter into any of these communications with anybody, really. But specifically here and now with the alcoholic, we always ask God for the power and the words and the experiences that we can share unbeknownst to us that will come out of our mouths, and it'll be ordained by God in our interaction with these people. Let him ask you the question if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. So I'm going to give you a caveat on that. Be really careful with stressing the spiritual feature freely too early, because it can really push them away. The thing that's going to get the alcoholic when they're new, when they're wet, when they're in their first year of a 12-step program, it's not the talk about God and spirituality and fucking meditation, sitting on a fucking pillow with a gong, fucking asking this power for help. That's not what they care about. They want to know how to stop drinking. And you can talk about, you know, the steps, but maybe not a lot about God. That comes with tact and common sense. If the man be an agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes good sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he live by these spiritual principles. So that's going to come down the line. Once you've kind of got him hooked in and you're talking, at some point you're going to have to talk to him about higher power and what it's going to take, right? So when dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There we go. Using general everyday language. So I was talking with my girlfriend today about, I'm going to go up north this September. I'm going to go to a treatment center, and these guys want me to do something, do some workshops up there. And, you know, they're going to compensate me and hire me basically to do some like work in the indigenous and the steps and stuff. And I don't really know exactly. And then I asked my girlfriend, you know, if she wanted to do a presentation, because she just wrote her master's thesis on decolonizing using dogs. But she's also, since she's done that thesis, she's been hired to do a bunch of research projects One was on using companion animals to help addicts and alcoholics continue sobriety. So I thought it would be a really good mix to throw, and all of her research she did for her thesis was from Aboriginal men and women, elders from all over North America and the world, actually, some from Australia. So she talked with a lot of elders about Indigenous stories, creation stories, and I figured she could do a good presentation to these guys in one of my workshop sessions. And she was like, yeah, okay. And then today I was talking to her on the phone, and she was kind of like, I'm really going to sit down in the next couple of days and try to conceptualize this workshop that I'm going to do. And she was talking about like interspecies and all these fancy words. And I'm just like, okay, if you're going to go into this treatment center, you got to fucking talk like regular language. These guys don't care about interspecies in canine, blah, blah, blah. Say fucking dogs and how it relates to us. That's what they're going to understand. And that's what this is saying, right? Keep the conversation raw and real. And I think in some ways, that's why I've had so much success, is because I'm raw and I'm real, and I don't try to butter it up with fancy words. I throw the odd fuck bomb into words, and I make up my own words like alcoholism and stuff like that. And people relate to that, right? There is no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues no matter what your own convictions are. Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far more superior than yours. In that case, he is going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. But he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be the example of truth that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call his attention to the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could have not applied it, or he would not be drinking. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice these very precepts he knows so well. So just like a kind of like a little backstory, like a lot of guys come in here from whatever religious denomination, and they think they got this program by the balls because they believe in God. My experiences couldn't be further from the truth. The ego really likes to hide within religious belief systems. And if the ego and self is the problem, it's going to attach to whatever the fuck it is. And it really attaches to a lot of religious belief systems and commandments and whatever the rules are in these religions. And they're going to be really forthright in talking about their God and how whatever it is has helped them so much in their life. And we got to be really careful not to like stomp on that too early and just let them talk. And there's certain aspects of the literature that'll shift that stuff. Like We Agnostics is designed to shift some of those thoughts and thinking. And as you become a more fluent sponsor, you learn how to shift those ideas, because if they hang on to a lot of those old beliefs, they're not going to get sober. So we got to shift how they're actually believing in God. And a big one is, praying to a dead relative is much different than praying to Jesus on the cross. Go ahead, Bryn.
So my question is that I've had a couple sponsees that are intellectualizing the whole thing, and they've been to therapy for so many years, and they think they have the solution, and they keep slipping. So my question is that like apply this same thing to their what they have as knowledge?
Okay. Good question. So you're talking about more experienced people who have been around the program and think they know a thing or two, but they keep slipping. Because my advice would be, it's because the faith that they need has not been accompanied by self-sacrifice. They don't understand self. So God has just become a theory. And if God stays a theory, The ego loves that idea that I'm connected to God, but if we're not putting in the practical application, these people are still running the show themselves, unbeknownst to them, and they'll drink again. So I guess how you show these kind of guys is you walk them back through the chapter, We Agnostics, and to get some backsight on this, listen to my We Agnostics chapters on one of my big book studies. I go through the last half of it really deeply and well. And it's designed to kind of take their old ideas. And the more you ask them questions about their beliefs, the more they'll either get pissed off or they'll start thinking like, holy shit, I need to change this. And then where it really becomes apparent is in step 3, you know, where it says this concept. So it talks about, here, I'll just read it here. It's in step 3, page 62. Here's the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. So they're still playing God. They just don't know it. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father. We are his children. Most good ideas are simple. So that's a good idea. It's a good concept. At this point, it's only an idea and a concept. A lot of people that relapse like you're talking about, God's still only a concept. So these good ideas are simple. And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch which we pass through to freedom. So the concept of God is now the Father and I work for God. If it stays like that, nothing's going to change. But the next line at the top of 63, when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. Meaning, once I learn how to practically apply the step work, and I learn how to turn it over, then I'm going to get some actual results. And you got a new employer. He's all powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. And then you ask him this question, what's step 10 to you? You ask them what step 10 is. They're going to tell you 2 things. I promptly admit that I'm wrong. You're going to be like, okay. Or they're going to say, I take a nightly inventory at night. They're going to give you one of those answers. And you're going to go, there's the fucking problem. Because they don't understand step 10 and practically applying what step 10 is. That's where you turn your will and your life over. That's where you're sincerely taking this position. That's where you really get these fucking promises. So for anyone who's working with sponsees that keep slipping and they think they're turning it over, you always ask them, what's step 10? And they're going to give you 1 or 2 of those answers, and they won't really know step 10. And then you start teaching them step 10. Okay. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. And you can say that to him too. Like, if it's fucking working, you wouldn't be sitting here with me. If your religious convictions and your God was working, you wouldn't be sitting here with me taking you through the steps again. I said, you'd say, maybe you need a new God. Maybe you need a new conception of God. And that's where like a dead relative and these kind of things come in. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice these very precepts he knows so well. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We are dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. Outline the program of action. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Explaining how you made a self-appraisal. Step 4, how you straightened out your past and why you are endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. Don't ever say that to him. And I know lots of people talk about that and they say, you know what? I just tell him that you're helping me more than I'm helping you. I don't agree with that. Don't say that, because then they fucking think that you relying on them. Make it plain that he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. So for me, when I sponsor somebody, the number one thing I say when we start is, are you willing to pass this on and help other alcoholics? And like, honestly, just for me, and you guys have to cut your teeth and learn your own systems. But if they're not really willing to pass it on, if they just want it for themselves, I'm probably not going to work with them. But don't take that attitude too early, you guys, because you guys got to learn through the hardships of early sponsorship on how to actually do it. And then you'll develop your own kind of things like I have, right? Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. You can do that. Make it clear that he is under no pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You shouldn't be offended if he wants to call it off. So this is like, as you're working with somebody, their pride might come up and they might not want to work with you. And they might want to not talk to you anymore. And you have to have the wherewithal to be okay that these guys are going to come and go. And you always say, I wish you the best. My number's always on. And you just let them go. And if you're always beating yourself up going, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? You know what? You probably didn't do anything wrong. But you can always talk to this about your, whatever it was that you did do to your pillars and get some feedback. But most alcoholics aren't going to do this work. That's the bottom line. That's why we just keep going. But you're staying sober. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you've helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Maybe you have disturbed him on the question of alcoholism. Okay. Two things here. You guys may not like what I'm going to say, and I know when I share this in meetings, people do not fucking like this, okay? And it doesn't really sit well with, I'm going to say, most people. But I'm telling you, it fucking works, and it has to be this way to be successful for the most part. There is exceptions to every rule, but I'm going to say this, what I'm going to tell you is fucking gold. And these relationships that we build with these people, there's a bit of a hierarchy in the relationship. And what I mean like about that is there's the teacher and there's the student. This teacher has to stay the teacher to be effective, and the student has to be the student. So you got to be really careful about letting this fucking student-teacher relationship become fully equal, because then you've lost your power as the teacher. And then they don't listen to you. And women are especially bad for this. Once they do a 4 and a 5, the women will let their guard down on the teacher, and now they become friends. And then the power that you have as a teacher is lost because now they think you guys are the same. And then you try to do like defective character work in the 6, which is super important after the 5. You've lost the ability to do that because you become friends too much. And that's super important. And you guys can all think about your sponsors. You look up to them for some guidance, and you need that guidance. So we need to keep the relationship of student-teacher intact right through the process. And for me, like even through all of the guys I've sponsored, probably all of the ones that are still in touch with me, that's the relationship we have still. I can be friends with them too, to a lot of degree, but I'm still like that teacher for them. So it brings a lot of value to them, and it allows me to know what I'm doing. The ones that I've kind of mismatched the lines and I've let it grow into more of a friendship, which is going to happen. I have to tell most of these guys, like, you know, find a new sponsor, because our friendship has actually skewed my ability to sponsor you 5 years into your journey now. So they'll find a new sponsor, and then I can continue to be their friend and a pillar. So that's really important. Okay. And the other thing here, maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. So a lot of you guys know me. You've seen me sharing meetings, and I'm one of those guys that doesn't really mince the words. And I say shit that kind of sometimes it offends people. So one of the things, I'll use one thing that I've said. I'll go into these big meetings, and there's treatment center guys, maybe treatment center women, and they're, 40% of the population in the room at that time. And I know they're there. And I'll get up to the podium and I'll say something like, you know what? If you're from treatment or you're from, you know, one of the houses or whatever, I'm like, enjoy your free fucking sobriety. Because that's what you got right now. You got free sobriety, so you really enjoy that. And what? When you take your first step out of treatment, when you're done, is where your recovery really begins. And boom, like right there, guys don't really like me. But what I've actually done is I've disturbed them on the question of alcoholism. I talk about sex conduct and I talk about like 80% of what the people are doing in the room, and they don't like that. I've disturbed them on the question of alcoholism. I talk about anger. I talk about judgment. I talk about certain things. I've disturbed them on the question of alcoholism. Why is this to the good? This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will more likely follow your suggestions. So the more that you tell the truth in this program and you don't fucking butter it up with all the philosophy shit and all the beautiful stuff, and you tell it raw and real, you disturb them on the question of alcoholism, which is the defects of character, and they stand a better chance of following our suggestions. And in my experience, a lot of these guys that I have pissed off that are new in that first year or two, eventually they will come to me and they'll say, you know, something that I said like a year ago really stuck out and it pissed them off, but it's actually their problem. And so now I just gained a sponsee who's super willing because I've weeded them out with the truth over a year or two. And so for me, that levels me up in my ability to 12-step somebody, because now I got somebody who's been burning it down with their defect of character and they've been drinking. And finally at 2 years in, they're fucking asking me for help because they can't stay sober. And now I've weeded out so much of the bullshit just because I was honest and truthful in my sharing. And that really is effective to get people that are super willing. Your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of the program. He may rebel at the thought of drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. Do not contradict such views. Tell him once you felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. You know, maybe you were one of those guys that didn't do a step 4 and you tried to, you know, take what you wanted and leave the rest, which is a saying I hate. And then how would that work out for you? And like, share those things. You know what? I heard you say, you know, I kind of take what I want and I leave the rest. You know, I did that too for like 10 years. I never stayed sober for 10 years. But once I did what the book and the AA people or the CA people that were doing this and were successful, when I started listening, I got some serious results and I'm now 4 years sober, right? These little seeds are really important to be planting. On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. If he shows interest, lend him a copy of the book. Unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction that he likes. Sometimes the new man is anxious to proceed at once. You may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say that you have rushed him. Okay. Out of this book, there's not much that I totally disagree with. This is my own personal point. I don't agree with this. Okay. Sometimes the new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say that you rushed him. Who the fuck cares? If he's anxious to proceed at once and he's 5 days sober and you're new to sponsoring or you're in your first 2 or 3 years, fucking take that willingness that he's giving you and run with it. Even if he does say that, you know, you rushed him, you know the truth. And it doesn't matter really what he says anyway at the end of the day. You know you had a desire to seek and do God's will and take him through that material. And you have a lesson to learn about what other people are fucking saying anyway. Because it doesn't matter what other people say. It matters about what our purpose is and where our heart's at. And you'll probably learn through the experience of this guy, even though he might be pissed off at you. But that's where you leave it up to God. And you're like, okay, you know, I move on. And maybe he is mad and you say, you know, my number's always on. As long as you don't get into confrontations with these people, and hopefully by this point, you're practicing some principles before your own personality, and you realize, like I said, underline this is a very sick man, then you don't got any issues anyway, because you get it and you move on to the next person. So that's my take on that line. You will be most successful with alcoholics when you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. You know, staying humble, act in common sense. You will be most successful with alcoholics when you do not exhibit passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Really important. How do we do that? Well, maybe you got to learn to not do that by doing it a couple times, because sometimes we get into that. So no matter what you're going to do wrong, nothing is ever wrong, because if you have the take where you're going to try to grow in understanding and effectiveness, sometimes you got to learn what not to do on your way to learning what to do. So again, it's really important to have that desire to seek and do God's will, because none of these things will really be a mistake. They're going to be decisions that you learn and you grow from. And at the end of the day, you're going to be fine. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they worked for you. Offer friendship and fellowship, and tell him that if he wants to get well, you'll do anything to help. And that's the thing. You offer him friendship and fellowship. Doesn't necessarily say that you're his friend. You offer him fellowship and you offer him friendship, and you'll do anything to help. And I always throw this in there, dude, I'll match my enthusiasm for your recovery with your own enthusiasm for your own recovery. I'll go to any length with you, but I'm not going to go to any length above you for you. You have to lead this for yourself. And every now and then, we as sponsors will go to a little more length than our sponsees are willing to go. But at least we got to let them lead for most of it. Okay. But if he's not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him, boom, until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets hurt some more. So I'm going to end the study on this paragraph for tonight. If he's not interested in the solution that you're presenting, and if he expects you to be a person who always is just going to listen to his defects and him whining, he's in his self-pity, he's in his victim mentality, and that's all he wants you for, you might have to drop him. But before you drop him, you got to present him with what he's doing. Okay, bro, I'm not here to nurse your sprees of lust. You like every fucking 2 weeks, you're in a new relationship and you got women troubles. I've only been working with you for fucking 3 months and you're always into this shit. Like, when are you going to dumb me up and realize that that's part of your problem? And like, I'll do anything to help you, but you got to do something to help me here. How about stay single for 6 or 8 months while we do these steps, okay? And give yourself some space to learn about who you are. And they might not like that shit, but you spoke your truth and you knew what the truth was. Those are the sprees that we don't nurse either, as well as the alcoholic and addict sprees. You know, maybe there's anger sprees, maybe it's judgment, maybe whatever it is. And maybe they're stuck in like a step 4 and they can't grow. You're like, dude, you're going to be there until you're done your step 4 and 5, until you realize what your problem is, because you don't actually understand your true predicament. You're not going to change. And because if you're not changing, and if you read the last page on step 6 and the 12 and 12, delay is dangerous and rebellion may be fatal. Delay in working in these defects is dangerous. In rebellion, you fully tell me, fuck that, I'm going to go do this anyway, it may be fatal. Because when that selfish desires and those hard and fast lines that these guys hold on to, that shit can kill them, right? So before we let them go and tell them to move on, we present them at least with the truth, and you can do it in a kind and loving manner. And then if they're like, okay, I see, and I really need to get to work, let's move on this, then you move on it. But if their behaviors continue, you might have to shut them down. So that's all discussions with you and your 12-step pillars and your sponsor and your God and your own intuition and understanding this paragraph at the beginning level of alcoholism, like as the substance and drugs as the substance, and then taking that more into like defects of character. That's it. So we'll stop there and we'll continue here next week on the middle of 55. And we may or may not get through this whole chapter, but I think we will.